And it took parapsychology 30 years to realize that what was happening in these malevolent hauntings is you would witness an apparition, and then they would say, okay, that's kind of weird. I wonder if we captured anything on the camera. They would go to the camera, and the camera would not capture the apparition. The only thing the camera caught was a ball of light. And so that's when they came to the startling conclusion that the ball of light was the one actually projecting the apparition. So the implications here are very unfortunate for us researchers because we've created an entire field based upon something that may not exist at all.
The Codega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Codega and sharing one of yours. You know, when we talk about the paranormal and aliens and cryptids, I've said that these things they're all connected, and we're dealing with one larger puzzle and not individual separate ones. And well, I should actually give credit where credit is due. That would be to Vicky Joy Anderson, who kind of led me in that direction. Now, and these things, they're just not so different, and they're not so far away in thinking of one another. Now, what if these experiences are part of a bigger tapestry that we've only just begun to understand? Something woven into our beliefs, our fears, and even our history. So, tonight's guest, Nathaniel Gillis, has dedicated his work to exploring those very questions. He's a demonologist, author, and a speaker who looks at the unseen world not just through the lens of folklore, but through theology, psychology, and culture. Now, what I love about his approach is that it's not about like scaring people, it's about trying to understand the deeper meaning behind these mysteries. And now, before we bring on Nathaniel, I just want to give a shout out to all my subscribers and members. Thank you so much for supporting the show. It means the world to me. And let's just keep getting that message out there. Keep sharing. Do your part. I'll keep bringing in these great guests. So, without further ado, let's dive in and welcome Nathaniel to to the show. Nathaniel, welcome to Codega's Codex of Curiosities.
Thank you for having me, sir. It's great to meet you, and it's great to be on with you. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too. You know, I've watched a lot of your content, and it's right up my alley, right up my my viewers and listeners' alley as well. And I don't know why I didn't reach out to you sooner, but here we are, and I'm super excited to have you on. So, for our listeners and viewers who don't know a little bit about you, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction and perhaps where they can find you as well?
Yeah, so my name is Nathaniel Gillis. I am a lecturer and an author, and my work now is centered around a field I've created called necronetics. And that is about incubus, incubi, succubi case studies throughout history. But early on in my research, that's what I started out with, right? That was my primary source of research. And then I kind of evolved. And next thing I know, I'm reading about ufology and hybridism. And then I realized, like, wait a minute, it's just like what you said earlier. This doesn't seem to be separate phenomena. It seems to be a proto-intelligence. It's a singular intelligence that's diversifying its identity in our eyes. But if you guys want to look me up, you can find me on Instagram, and I'm also going to be creating my own platform called Parasymposia, where obviously I'll be on there, but I'll bring academics in and researchers in to discuss the field. But that's who I am, and I guess that's where I'm at.
I love it. Yeah, the website is not up and running yet, but you can still. I think you can become a member though prior to your
Early
full release.
access,
Correct?
absolutely early
Yes,
access.
that is something I am very interested in. So, Nathaniel, why don't you like? How did you get into this? Because this is not something that is a common subject, a common thing to pursue academically. How did you get into this? And I want to hear. Well, you lead this conversation.
Okay.
Let's let you do that.
So my very first paranormal encounter took place during an open house. My parents were looking to move in, or at least move into a house across town. And so I can remember walking through this empty home. It was a beautiful place. It's a beautiful home. But my dad led me by the hand into what would become my future room. There was nothing in it. It was just a bed. There was no chest of drawers or anything. The TV, it was just a bed in there. But he led me in there and said, take a look around, figure out, just in case we do buy the house, we want to know where you're going to be putting your stuff and kind of get acclimated with it. So my dad went back into the kitchen with the realtor, my mother. So I'm poking around. And I still remember this stench that the room had with it. It smelled like decomp or rotting organic matter, but there was nothing in it. Like I said, it was just carpet and a bed. And so I could feel being watched. Something was perceiving me, watching me in the room. And I didn't like what I felt instantly. I knew there's something really bad here. And I thought that someone had died, and I'm an 8-year-old kid. So I shouldn't be thinking that when I go into a new house, right? Like, what is
Yeah,
this?
exactly.
So for some reason, I still can't not determine why I felt to do this, but I was led to look underneath the bed. And when I did, there was a little girl underneath the bed. She had long, flowing black hair. She's a beautiful little girl. She's about my age at the time, 8 years old, I think, maybe 6, maybe a little bit younger, but full-bodied apparition, my friend. And whatever this thing was, because it certainly wasn't a little girl, it backed up against the wall. At which point, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I run out of the room. I didn't tell my parents until we got back into the car on the way home. I said, "Hey, listen, I think that one of a neighborhood little girl got stuck in that house or something, and now she's hiding underneath the bed that will become my room." And but soon enough, when we got actually into the house and moved in, I got acclimated to the neighborhood, and she didn't belong anywhere. And so that's when I realized like there's something majorly wrong here. But once we moved in, the entity mutated in its pathology. And so the little girl was never seen again. It was only that initial experience. But after that, it's funny because I was talking to my dad about this today. Um, I can still remember the pregnant silence in the middle of the night, something walking on the wooden floors in my living room and displacing its weight, like with boots on, it sounded like heavy, heavy footfall. At which point, I would hear a full blown conversation going on above my head.
Now,
Two,
above your head, like within the room, or like
yes,
the
in the
floor above?
ceiling. Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, yeah. And two entities were talking to each other. It just sounded just like two men discussing something. And I could never understand what they were saying. I was close enough, or they were close enough to me, unfortunately, for me to hear them. And so that's when basically all hell broke loose because the phenomenon evolved once more. And now it's a shadow person watching me out of the window. And my window sill was 7 foot tall. So it's really weird stuff. But I started realizing things about whatever this being was, because what would often occur is that the phenomenon would induce me into a looping nightmare. I won't say what happened because I don't want you to get demonetized or to, scare your viewers. Um, but the person did some really bad things to himself in the dream. And at the point you would think you'd wake up, or it would even switch to another dream, that wouldn't happen. It would go right back to the beginning. And so it would loop and loop and loop. And finally, when the phenomenon would let me wake up, I could feel this pulsating presence in the room. And the only way I can articulate it is that it was just feeding off of my fear. At which point, I'm trying to go to school. I did my best at school, but I was staying up all night long until the sun rose. And then I would get a good 40 minutes of sleep before my mom got me up to go to school. So I was crashed at school, brother. I'm passing out at school. And, I was failing grades and stuff. And the people didn't know what to do with me. Um, they had no experience with this stuff. I didn't want any for that matter. But so long story short, brother, that's what got me into the field. And since then I've been blessed to lecture internationally and being mentored by people who have been in the field longer than I've been alive. And so it's a nice niche to be in, but the research is very costly at times. And but I tell you what, it's the conversations like we're going to have that really push the narrative forward and make it all worth it.
Fantastic, and that's something I'm looking forward to. You had messaged me and said that, am I open to something new, something controversial or different? And of course, that's what the show is all about. Like the interview I just did 2 days ago, I uploaded it already. It's scheduled and it's already been demonetized. So just to
Oh,
let you
great.
know that this is the stuff that I'm into, and it is what it is. That's the sometimes it's the price you got to pay to get the truth out.
It is, and it does come with a price. But okay, my background is in demonology, but the people that I'm researching with now are parapsychologists. And together we're kind of, I don't want to say creating a new field, but the scientific method is now validating much of what we knew in demonology. Like for instance, in demonology, the case studies, they tell stories of entities that would replicate reality to the experiencer or force a certain perception upon them, specifically in incubi cases where, it looked like my husband or it looked like my wife or it looked like my boyfriend, and it wasn't at all. So we've seen that. I even have a good friend of mine who's a host of another show who has had that happen where he had broke up with his fiance, I think it was, or his girlfriend, not fiance, 6 or 7 months prior, and moved across town, changed his phone number. He gets off of work one night. There's a knock at the door. It's the ex-girlfriend. So she stays the night. In the middle of the night, he wakes up and she's not there, and there was no evidence of her being there at all. So the next morning, people don't realize what we're dealing with, brother. If it was demonology or demonic in the sense of Catholicism, that would be one thing that would be pretty easy to deal with, really. But whatever we're dealing with transcends all models. But to my point here, this individual gets on his phone and he's calling friends of friends. Finally, gets this ex-girlfriend's phone number and calls her. Who is this? This is my buddy Mike. This is Mike. Okay, what do you want? I just want to know what happened last night. You abruptly left, right? And there was no evidence of you even being there. And I got to thinking about it. How did you even know where I lived? Like you knew my exact apartment number. She came unglued. I'm with somebody. That was not me. Don't ever call me back again. You're crazy. Click. So those cases are plenteous in the field. The problem we're having, again, is understanding that the phenomenon can manipulate our perception of it. Have we ever truly witnessed this thing? Even the demonic manifestations that we're seeing in terms of the archetypes that are incarnating, they also do not fit into biblical antiquity. Whatever these are, again, it's almost like a program that the phenomenon incarnates in our presence to where it leans into trends. And it's a physiological construct. And we think, okay, that's a real entity. And it's not. It's the byproduct of the phenomenon manifesting something to interface with us. And so this is why when you look at cases like even the dog man, the wolf man, a good friend of mine in England, Paul Seclair, he's one of the premier researchers in that field. But brother, he's had cases where people have witnessed the dog man running next to their car that's speeding at 55, 60 miles an hour. And this thing is barely moving his legs, but it's keeping up with him. And so he and I had a conversation one day. I think it was an actual show that I was on with him. And the question was asked, number one, that's impossible. Number two, how can it survive without a food source in that area? And so that's when we concluded that these aren't real entities. This is
Like
more along the
avatars.
line. Avatars. Yes, yes. And we also have another case in Bolton, England, I think it was, where a group of friends were walking on the train tracks and they see one of these beasts following them. And you'll see the hint of a program employed. where this entity is chasing them and they're freaking out. I mean, come on, it's a bipedal 7-foot beast. It's like a Stephen King novel at that point, right? And so they're running, and the smallest of them trips and falls. They kept on going. Well, of course, by that time, the entity is now standing over top of him. At which point, right, he would have been predatory and would have eaten him or killed him or something. He didn't. As soon as he stared down into the man's face, the entity just disappeared. So, what we're looking at in these interface events, there are three systematic aspects of all of them. And that's number one, there's a learning matrix employed. We know that because even some of the abductees I've worked with were taken by entities that looked like their favorite cartoon character. Yep. And that worked for a period of time until about 2 or 3 years later, the individual that I worked with, she's much older now, doesn't even watch those cartoons. That's for little kids. I'm not a little kid anymore. And yet the phenomenon manifests to her as that cartoon character. And now she's standing over this little entity. And to her astonishment, it realized, you don't believe in this image, do you? You've seen through the archetype. There's no way I could be what I'm trying to be right now. And so it's at that moment that the entity's eyes got big and it started moving counterclockwise, staring into her eyes. And then she said, the only way I can articulate this is that it was measuring my belief in the image. So there's a learning matrix, right? There's a learning matrix employed with this stuff to where when you force the phenomenon to adjust to you, it will pull from a learning matrix out there and then download an image, and then it'll interface as that image. So
And, and,
that's
and
really
this
what we're
is
looking at.
and this is something that I've heard multiple times. I was talking with Fringe,
I love
and
Fringe. Yeah.
yes, and she brought that up. I had another guest on just recently. She was talking about Count Chocula peering through her
Yeah.
window, and seeing this as well. And it's like when you say these cartoon characters, some people might be like, "Oh, that's crazy." I'm like, it isn't. I've heard this before. This isn't the first time. It won't be the last time. This is something that does come up. And I like how
Mm-hmm.
you said that they're gauging her belief
Yes.
in this, because I totally believe that as well. Like that is something that is happening.
Oh yeah, 100%. And there's this kind of aspect of the more you believe in the image, the more you empower the entity wearing it. But when you start looking at these cases, it's apparent that if these entities aren't real in and of themselves, then God help us, my friend. God help us. Here's why. Because we originally thought that apparitions like kind of implied the presence of the afterlife. That's an apparition. That's dear Aunt Edna, right? That's Uncle Ted. And it took parapsychology 30 years to realize that what was happening in these malevolent hauntings is you would witness an apparition. And then they would say, okay, that's kind of weird. I wonder if we captured anything on the camera. They would go to the camera, and the camera would not capture the apparition. The only thing the camera caught was a ball of light. And so that's when they came to the startling conclusion that the ball of light was the one actually projecting the apparition. So the implications here are very unfortunate for us researchers because we've created an entire field based upon something that may not exist at all. Think about that, brother. And if that's the case, again, then we have to go look at the other archetypes the phenomenon manifests through. And again, I am a proponent of what's called the single or the unified field theory. I don't even know what I'm a proponent of anymore. I'm like, I'm a proponent of this. No, the unified field theory. Anyways, yeah. The problem again is that when you go into even like the skull experiment, you start to see all of the archetypes they're often employed as programs by the phenomenon. It's like levels of initiation. I'm going to appear as this, and then we're going to work together until I until I establish another connection, and then another archetype's going to manifest, and then another one, and sooner than later, what the phenomenon has done is has initiated us through archetypes into another interface event of what is called NHI, non-human intelligence, wherein that phenomenon comes out. After establishing that portal, then it manifests. And that's exactly what happened in the Scroll experiment, where they're performing rituals and they have a Ouija board, they're doing psychic mediumship and all that, and that's what the phenomenon did, right? They had their room was trying to be controlled by them, right? They tried to keep the phenomenon within scope and under their control. But what happened was, after a certain amount of time, they went through all of the archetypes and they landed in the presence of whatever this really is. And next thing you know, not dozens, hundreds of alien grays manifest in the room and in the building. But here's the problem. This is where you collapse all the archetypes. Number one, they're apparitions of alien grays. Number two, they have the bulbous eyes. Number three, one of them claimed to have been their guide. So when you see them, right, all in the same place, that should not happen. And so that's why I and others are working from the position that what we are dealing with is something that's masquerading as many different entities. But at the end of the day, there are certain elements that stay true.
That is extremely interesting and fascinating as well, all at the same time. When it, it really lends credence to a lot of these, like these orb sightings. When people see these orbs, that is the projector almost in a way. Now is that the is that the source, or is that just the projection itself, the unit of projection that it's being transitioned through? I
So what we're dealing with,
I can sit here for hours. I know we only have, like,
it's
40
okay,
minutes here,
bud.
but wow.
So I mean, we could do another show this week, and I don't really care. I got to get this information out. That's what's
Yeah.
most important to me. But yeah, so there are what are called pre-archetypes, where like what happens? Like, what do you see before you see the UFO? What do you witness before you see the white lady? And that is the most common manifestation. And due to Barry Fitzgerald and Steve Mara's research, they've concluded scientifically and empirically that when you're interfacing with one of these balls of light, it can replicate reality. It will force a perception upon you. And they even have had experiments where they took CE5 practitioners out at nighttime. They placed a brainwave monitoring unit on their head and said, go through the CE5 protocols you were trained by and in by Stephen Greer. Do them, go through them. And certainly this individual did that. And the phenomenon began to incarnate above their heads. And they're watching the brainwave activity. And within 20 seconds, my friend, the phenomenon had induced this practitioner of CE5 into theta brainwave activity. It literally forced a perception upon her, and now she's in a trance. So, what are we really dealing with? The fact remains that we do not have access to, I guess, how could I say this? We don't really understand how powerful this phenomena is. We want to, and we're somewhere in between the three levels of knowledge: the known, the unknown, and the unknowable. Whatever this is, again, it's possible we've never ever seen its face. We've only seen what it wants us to see. And even then, we have to question everything, and so that's where I'm at with it. But the kind of research that I and others are doing, it's blending a lot of demonology in with parapsychology. Again, not that the correct model is demonology or demonological, but whatever we're dealing does seem to be parasitic. It does need something in this dimension to manifest. And when it wants to incarnate, it will seek to be seen by us. So this has everything to do with the observer effect.
I love it because
You good?
oh yeah, oh yeah, because
So
it's kind of like the it's like the double slit experiment, you know. Reality is created
absolutely, brother.
by the observer.
Right. And so again, when we're dealing with a CE5 in terms of it being a self-initiated event, I do not believe that at all. It's the see again, we're we're just now learning how to measure and when to measure the experience. When we're dealing with people that are they're thinking, okay, you know what, I'm going to go out in the desert, or I'm going to go out underneath the sky, and I'm going to do A, B, and C. They think that they initiated contact. No, the phenomenon did. It's the one that put the thought and said, look over here. And when we see it, it manifests. Even Dr. Gary Nolan had a case study recently of a child in France who was in a car, and he's looking through the window, or whatever it's called, the moonroof. He's seeing this craft hover directly over the vehicle. He starts describing this craft to his parents. His mother takes out a camera. It's 2025, right? You got an Apple iPhone, you've got a really nice camera. She snaps a photograph of it, and what he was witnessing with his eyes was not what they were capturing on camera. So again, even if we're talking about ufology, if we understand that key point and accompany it with the following point, and that is that the phenomenon can create physiological constructs, then ufology itself may just be another failed experiment with the phenomenon. Right? It's there. I can touch it. I can
My mind
measure it.
is blowing on
Yeah.
this one, man.
Right.
Yes.
I can touch it. I can touch it. It's real. It's got to be real. I can quantify it until it's not. And the problem we're having again in the field is that even the tools that we're measuring the phenomenon with, many of them may have even been created by the phenomenon. And so when it comes down and gives us technology, we use that technology to go and interface with it. And so it's almost unbearable at times. But getting back to my initial point here, yes, we're not sure what we're studying. One of the insights that I wanted to bring to the table tonight with you is that I've been doing research with Steve Mera, and Steve Mera has been talking about apports and the necessity of apports within the phenomenon. And he's had cases where people have taken figurines out of their homes, thrown them on the ground, they shattered to a million pieces. They go back into the house, and the phenomenon had put another one right in its place.
Wow. You know,
Right?
it's funny you mentioned apports because my daughter and I had something happen where we both saw something fall out of the ceiling and
Hmm.
shatter a glass. We had like a glass little container, and it shattered it. And I I saw something out of the corner of my eye, caught like I saw it happen, and then my daughter is sitting there right beside it where it happened. And of course I said, "What did you do?" She's like, "Nothing." She's like, "But I saw something come from the ceiling, like something fell." And I'm like, "I okay, I did too." Like I
I
assumed it
did
was
too.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I assumed it was her, but no, I saw something fall and it just literally shattered this glass. And it was thick glass as well. So these A ports, it's this is absolutely
Let
like
me,
astonishing everything that's happening. Yeah.
okay, so let's go down this rabbit hole. So, what Steve and Barry both realized, was that the phenomenon was anchoring its presence through the apport. Their work is unbelievable, by the way. The phenomenon was apporting objects in the house as anchors. And so, what they would do is they would remove the apport from the home, place it in a storage area. And a day later, they'd get a phone call from the family. Thank you for everything you've done. The phenomenon has dissipated. They said, no, it hasn't. It's retriangulating in your home. There's no more beacon there. There's no beacon to anchor to. And so I took that. And again, it does, and it's another implication that we're dealing with the same phenomenon, the same mechanisms. The only apports we've seen in demonology are in demoniac cases, where in the middle of an exorcism, the entity will use that body to regurgitate something. I want to introduce the theory that during these exorcisms, when they are regurgitating nails and smaller objects from the body, those are apports. I want to hypothesize that that's the phenomenon trying to re-anchor itself after it leaves the body. So whatever we're dealing with, it has obfuscated the truth. It does not want us to know this. There have been people that have come forward with this kind of research and they've been taken out. A car cuts them off. They get involved in a hit and run, or even pulled out of their body, like Albert K. Bender, where he's researching this understanding in this field, and next thing he knows, he's hovering out of his body, and they're speaking directly to him. I am reminded of a case of Professor Rene Hardy, who in the 1970s he had created a master thesis, or that's actually a doctoral thesis on this phenomenon, ufology. And he approached it from the scientific method, of course. So it's like almost like a secularist, materialist worldview. And but his conclusions were completely different. He realized that it's more like an ultra terrestrial model of the phenomenon, to where this world is not our own. We are living in a construct, an artificial habitat. In the way the phenomenon engages with us, it has to be present with but absent from. So what's with us is the mask. What's absent from us is the proto-intelligence and the source. Well, what happened to him, of course, and he wasn't alone in this, unfortunately. But the night before, he was set to release his thesis to the world. He was found deceased, and the autopsy said that it was by his own hand. The family knew that was not true. Our Rene would never do that. He was a good, godly man. He didn't have mental health issues. There was no substance abuse issues there. And so at the funeral, again, it's silent. Everybody is shuffling into their seats. The door is shut. And right before it starts, the doors open back up, and 6 or 7 very, very tall, slender men in black suits go in and sit down. Now, they remember talking to these individuals. People took photographs of them. They had them on video. It's only afterwards, as families do, they got together and they're asking each other, like, who were those gentlemen? They were very weird. They were cordial. I remember shaking their hand. They seemed very nice, but like, we can't place them. They're not part of our family. They're not a part of academia. What's going on here? And that's when one guy goes, okay, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we just go ahead and pull up the footage? And they weren't even on camera. They didn't even show up. So what this points to, again, is that if this is in fact demonic, we have to go back to the drawing board, like, completely, and be intellectually honest and say, oh my God, we may have absolutely no idea what this is. And that's a good possibility. With respect to how the phenomenon can manipulate perceptions, it's done that all throughout these case studies. And it's not just interface events. Like I said, I have another friend of mine who was on vacation in Tennessee with his wife, and they're on the highway and they pass this beautiful lake, and there's the blue clouds are reflecting off the lake. And they decided, it'd be a good idea to take a picture of this. We want to put this in our memories forever. They took a picture and look at the camera, and there is a UFO, a UAP, hovering directly over the water. A cylindrical metallic object hovering over the water. They could not see it, but it was captured on camera. So this is where we are in the field, even with Skywatcher and CE5 events. They're realizing that what they are seeing with their eyes is completely different than what they're capturing on camera. And so what we're realizing more than anything is that the phenomenon has complete control over our technology, and at times even our own perception. I am reading a book called Dark Gods, and this will kind of, I guess, exemplify what we're talking about. This gentleman in the book was working with guides, working with one of these entities. And he's walking by a church and he hears these hymns being sung. He feels this immediate drawing into the building. And the entities are saying, we don't want you to do that. We would not advise you to do that. And so going against the grain, he goes in there. He stays for about an hour. He leaves. But afterward, at nighttime, he's sleeping. And he hears a voice in his mind to say, we told you not to go into that church. Next thing he knows, he feels two very muscular hands wrapping around his throat and pushing him into his bed. He cannot breathe. When he turned the light on, it was his own hands.
Oh my God.
His own
That's
hands.
intense.
Right. And this, again, even within evangelicalism and fundamentalism, that we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared. That even the demonic hypothesis is merely just another mask to where the phenomenon can manipulate us. I mean, we've had cases where holy water didn't work, prayers didn't work. So what is that then? And I'm not going to say that I don't believe they work. Certainly, we have evidence of that, right?
Yep.
And so I do believe that's the case. I mean, come on, these guys didn't want to go to church. I wonder why, you know. Um, but my point here is there are aspects of the phenomenon that need to be understood, and we're just now again. It's not that we're getting the wrong answers. We've been asking the wrong questions, and so now we're finally getting to some of the source methods of this.
Wow. This is super fascinating, as well. Like it's like they are in control, and there, like you did say, there are some occasions where calling on Jesus or any type of faith kind of based thing doesn't work. You were mentioning Fringe earlier. She goes into that as well, and we're dealing with this facade, like this something else that we don't really know. And it's, we see one thing, but when you try to video it with your phone or your camera
Right.
kind of thing, it's something else. Like I myself had that same experience. I saw a plasma UFO is the best way to call it. It was like this white cloud and it was undulating, moving all over itself. And I tried using my phone I had this was years ago, but I was using a Samsung S3 Galaxy and I was trying to video it. It wasn't there. It was not there.
It's not there. You know, brother. Some of the parapsychological cases I've heard of with Steve Mary and Barry Fitzgerald. It's just it's almost like we're in control of very little, if anything. I mean, it's precognitive. It is precognitive and sentient. So it knows the future to an extent. How? And again, I do believe that demonology has given us many offerings throughout history, primarily being hybridism. And so I do believe that the demonological version of hybridism is accurate, that these aren't extraterrestrials merging their DNA with us, and they're not inseminating women with fetuses. No, they're inseminating them with avatars that these beings can actively possess. So it's consciousness. It's something that's fluid. It's an energy, and but that's really where we are. And yeah, I think it's fascinating, specifically about the demoniac coughing up apports. Why? Because it doesn't want to leave. It's trying to re-anchor itself in that room. That right there, like I had to call Steve this morning. I said, I got to tell you this. And it seems to be what's going on. But we're just now getting these answers. And the problem is, even with Catholicism and demonology and exorcisms, uh, they didn't get the right answers because they weren't asking the right questions. If they were parapsychologists, they'd realize what the phenomenon's trying to do. It's trying to anchor itself. It doesn't want to leave the body, so it's trying to anchor itself. But yeah,
To the location is kind of what it's doing, so it can
yep,
return back to that same location.
yep,
Now, if we're talking like Matrix, simulation kind of thing, it's almost like a save game point. It's like I'm going to drop this here, this point here, so I have this, I'm logged in at this point in this location, and I can return back at this time to this exact location and time,
hmm.
or maybe not time.
Well, let's go down that rabbit hole for a fleeting moment.
Okay.
Um, the phenomenon can replicate reality. So we have cases of UAPs manifesting near trees, and then when they leave the tree, and then the researcher goes out and finds out, like, they do soil tests, there's no root system. That tree, those trees were part of the manifestation of the UAP. So literally fabricating portions of reality around us to where we would think that's a plane. It's not. I mean, and look at the implications here, brother. What does that mean exactly? And does that imply that all of reality, uh-oh, here's where it gets dark. All of reality could very well, right, be a construct. And what we're witnessing in the paranormality of it all is the black cat in the matrix. It should not happen. It's a glitch, right? It's a glitch. And we've seen this in times past, specifically in the book Eros and Evil with Ariel Masters. He starts to discuss witch-air literature and cases in medieval period. The phenomenon would abduct these women, and these women would think that they're copulating with elves and demons and corpses and devils. And then again, the phenomenon would force that perception upon them. Now, there were many cases where the perception was maintained, right? They did believe, okay, yeah, that happened. A, B, and C occurred. We performed the ritual. That's good. There are other cases, my friend, where the phenomenon glitched again. They weren't on a mountaintop. These weren't corpses and devils. They were being poked and prodded by metallic objects that were designed to, and I don't mean this in a wrong way, but to facilitate and fulfill the sensory experience. It wasn't real, but it was designed to construct something around them to where they would think this is what's going on, and it wasn't. And we even have cases where the phenomenon has taken the wife, and the husband wakes up to go to the bathroom or get a glass of water, and he sees her there. But it wasn't her. The phenomenon had replaced her with a replica, and he never knew. And so we see this replication method throughout the entire field, but the implication is what disturbs me.
This is super super interesting on this one.
Mhm.
These, what are the implications, like what is the
Um,
end game, the end goal of this all? Because and like everything you're saying, I'm like, yeah, I've experienced something like that. Like myself, I experienced seeing my grandma, who was alive at the time, upstairs in the bedroom working on the computer that I was just working on. I was outside looking in. It was dark outside, but the light was on inside, and it was my grandma. But my grandma doesn't live with us. She's not here.
right.
And like what is the implications? Like
What is
why did I see that? And of course, I questioned myself at that time, like, oh, I must have been my sister or something like that. And I went in and questioned my family. No one was there, and it's just these strange. What are the implications?
oh my god.
Why are they interfering with us?
Yeah, so I am not okay, so there are some lazy arguments out there that say, okay, if they were a threat to us, they would have wiped us out already. Again, that's to me, that's intellectually lazy, because that assumes they don't need us. There is some symbiosis present, right? I mean, we love bacon, but doesn't mean we're going to go out and kill every pig. You see how dumb that sounds? It's like, oh, come on, guys, we got to do better. And that's just me ranting and raving for for a moment. But yeah, so that's what it is. They're letting us live because they need us for something. And but yeah, they do seem to be, again. It's not just the phenomenon that the phenomenon is controlling a perception of it, but there are cases where it is replicating reality or creating it right in front of our eyes. And if that happens, and it is, then we have to question the simulation hypothesis, right? And even some cases where the apparition itself is just that archetype rendering itself in this dimension. It's partially manifesting, right? And then you kind of get into the aspect of it needing a learning matrix. It needs to learn something. It needs a location. It has to actually download itself into this reality. So it does. I tell people all the time that if you want to know the most accurate model of the phenomenon through cinema, it would be Dark City.
I talk about that movie regularly.
Well,
It is
only
something
because
that I
it's
believe.
awesome.
Exactly, exactly. There is so much truth to Dark City. It's ridiculous. Like this replicating, of memories, creating memories, trying to control and changing our environment. Yes. Yeah.
It's what it appears to be. And sadly enough, whatever these beings are, they do have a pathology. They do have preferences. You know, they want worship. They want altars built to them. They they're employing sigils on bodies, and that's some of the newest research being done. Where even through like ultraviolet lights, turn the light off, put a light on it, and you'll see sigils on the body of the experiencer. They have been found in mouths. They've been found underneath eyelids, and so whatever they are, like I said, it would be preferential, right? I'd prefer it to be something I can understand. But that's not what we're seeing. Whatever this is transcends all of that. But it does, again, there is some arguments and merits to demonology because what we're dealing with, they are performing rituals on people. And there's evidence now that I've collected with others where the abductions themselves, the phenomenon, it's crazy, but the phenomenon will interface as an alien. But then after the abduction, the experiencer will be covered with sigils from head to toe. That's not an alien. It's not an extraterrestrial. That's a practitioner. That is an occultist. That is a dark sorcerer. And so when you interact with that level of entity, all bets are off because they'll come into your home, they'll it's really bad. And so that's why this research is expensive and dangerous, but at the same time, we're starting to breach a threshold here to where experiencers are finally getting answers. Why? Because we're asking the right questions.
Hmm. Now, do you believe? So you saying some of this technology that we're using is, you know, from the source is kind of what
Yeah.
we're given. Could that not be an apport, for them, like our
Oh
cell
my
phone?
God.
Could that not
There
be
we
an
go.
anchor
There
point
we
for
go.
them?
You're exactly right. Yeah, absolutely. And let's get back to Richard Banderick real quick. He was a CEO of an aerospace company. And he said 40 years ago, he was contracted with the government to go out into gifting fields and to collect metamaterial donated by the phenomenon. Now, here's another disturbing implication because it feeds into the hypothesis of a simulation. He said the metamaterial they had, if it did not agree with you, it would dissolve into dust in your hand. No, no, that's number one. Number two, he said that it reflected the environment it was in. So, like, right, okay, if it's in the sky, it would have looked like the sky. If it's on the ground, it looks like the ground. If it's in dust or sand, it looks like the sand. But it's not sand. It's replicating it, but it's not. And so this is why, again, it's like that movie, The Truman Show, right? When he's out there on the boat and one of the lights falls out of the sky. What is that? Again, that's evidence of the construct. That something is telling our species that may not be real in whatever these beings are. They're coming from outside the construct. Nathaniel, what do you mean construct? Not just physicality, but time and space. That's where they are. And that's where the Collins elite model comes in, where, initially they believe these are demons, demons, demons. And there's research for that and evidence of that to a degree. Whatever they experienced was like these beings existed outside of time and space. They do have access to the soul. And the evidence suggests that sometimes the soul itself is what they're after. It's what they operate through. I had that experiencer with the remote viewer. The case I had is fascinating, where his dad was going out of body and he met entities that were sorcerers. That's what the son told me. He said, Nathaniel, he goes, years and years went by. He goes, I've come to the conclusion that my father encountered a species of sorcerers. They took him out of his body. When he went back into his body, from underneath the skin, subdermal sigils began to push their way to the surface.
Wow.
What?
How
What are we dealing with, my friend?
exactly? This is, I don't know. Is this like this form of technology or magic, or it's one and the same that they're able to do these things and they're manipulators of our environment and able to control us in a way that
Boom.
we can't perceive.
Let me send this over to you, okay, bud? In quantum imaging, I can't go too much into this for now, but in quantum imaging, we're finding sigils. And it's possible that sigils themselves are the code that is helping some of the construct stay in place, holding its form. And that's it's interesting, but it's like, oh God, no, But yeah, so whatever we're dealing with, it transcends all known models, and for whatever reason, it wants worship. It wants altars. I've recently been talking to researchers from Brazil and Italy. In Brazil, they recently had a Pleiadian ambassador come and do a lecture, and at the end of the lecture, suddenly she whips out an altar, whips out a deity, and tells them to perform an incantation. And then suddenly, outside in the darkness, lights begin to manifest. So, regardless of the interface events, regardless of all the archetypes, there's a common pathology, and that is that they perform sorcery on people, and that our conjurers are the ones being conjured. These aren't self initiated contacts. The phenomenon is leading us to believe that because it doesn't want us to realize how much control it has over our environment.
Wow. That is fascinating. So it's kind of like we it allows us to believe this, that we are special. We are the chosen ones. When
Oh
in
my God, yeah.
fact, it's kind of like, no, you're just, I don't want to say this, but you're gullible, and we're going to use that. Like, I don't want to use that word per se because
Yeah.
but it's kind of what it is. It's like we will allow you to believe that so that we can control you, and you will be this conduit for us.
Yes. Yes. As the Collins elite put it, they gave these practitioners the illusion of control. And yeah, at a certain point, at the time of the phenomenon's choosing, it transcends that archetype. The mask is off, and now you're staring into the eyes of something that we can't properly quantify. We can't measure it because as soon as we measure it, it could change. And so, really, it's just fluid. And, anyways, yeah, I mean, we're still trying to understand how much access to our species the phenomenon has. I've been telling people here lately, I have a photograph of an entity's handprint coming out of a body underneath the skin. It's pushing its hand through. Yeah, yeah. What is that? Right? What?
Now, I have a question on this. A question:
Yeah.
do you believe our dream state is something more where we actually have maybe a more control or more access to that world, that maybe in this conscious state we think we're the chosen ones, but it's actually in the dream state where we're able to do something back or protect ourselves or have more access or be more accessible as well?
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I think that's why in a lot of these interface events, the phenomenon will induce the experiencer into a dreamlike state. I have access to you. And that's also evidence of rituals being performed where we have experiencers that, again, they thought it was just a dream and it wasn't. And they wake up with sigils on their body. There is also a relationship between the soul first and the skin second. And there's another implication that whatever they're doing to us, they're doing it to the soul first. And then once the soul is positioned back into the body, then the anomalies and all of it, sigils start to manifest through the body. But and again, now getting back to the sigilology and everything, the phenomenon does seem to be following not just practitioners of the occult, but certain practitioners of the occult. So Austin Osman Spar had his sigil philosophy was that the body absorbs, activates, and expels the sigils. That's at the successful fulfillment. Watch this is crazy of the ritual. Then the sigils will leave. What does that mean for our species? That means that some experiences were performed upon, and that there's something on the other side that's performing a ritual on them. And we're seeing the end result of it as the phenomenon is sigilizing the body. It's underneath the skin. That's one stage, right? And then absorbs it, then it expels it. Those are three separate stages, and we're witnessing that in real time. The problem within ufology, though, and even in the Virginia case in 1996, is that we're not being honest with the data. Those weren't aliens at all. I spoke to a Brazilian researcher that lives in that part of Brazil, and he said everybody here knows. Everybody knows that the forest that these beings came out of, there's an altar in that forest. And who built the altar? A prominent occultist in Brazil. And they said that once this man performed the ritual, then the beings manifested, and they were accompanied by other archetypal beings. So, what we're having though in ufology, again, is because we're not being honest with the data, they're constructing a narrative that it doesn't exist. And at the end of the day, they're also building altars to these beings. And so we're playing this game of just hide and seek when truthfully the data doesn't lie. The data says, look, it's just like Jack Parsons. You open up a portal, it's just like the skull experiment. You open up that portal, you'll never be able to close it again.
That is so intriguing. When you're talking about sigils and everything, it makes me think of Danny Goler. I don't know if you know Danny Goler. He is the DMT laser experiment where they're able to recreate this, put the laser on the wall, and everybody. I'm not saying everybody, but most people see codes running in
Right.
the laser as
Yes,
well.
I've heard of
So
that. Yes, yes.
yes,
Right.
th- this is like these sigils are everywhere. They're on everything. You know,
Oh, yeah.
and we create these portals. These altars are portals, like you said. You know, like the skull
Yeah.
experiment. You know, we create a portal. We created an entrance into our world. Like and I get into Ouija boards a lot. Like I say, stay away from them. I believe that that is a way. You know, we're manifesting or we're creating, we're opening a portal. You know, there's sigils on there. Yes, they're words, but they're sigils, and maybe we're unlocking a code on our side that allows them full
Absolutely.
access into this. And
Absolutely.
that's why I say we all need to stay away from that. Unfortunately, I didn't when I was younger. But I don't know. And these apports that you're talking about, like these locking, these anchors. Yeah, maybe we'll call it an anchor. Um, it can be anything. It could be
Oh my
anything.
God.
And uh, I have so many stories that I know we're running out of time here. I have so many stories. Like there's one. I'll be quick here. That I believe that this could be an aport. I was driving home from El Paso to Chihuahua, Mexico, and I got a image in my mind that I was going to see a dead bird of prey on the side of
Hmm.
the road, and I could see its wing flapping in the wind, such as this. And I told my wife, "Yeah, This is what I saw, and if I stop the cars because I seen this." And sure enough, it's exactly. I saw a owl with the wing waving like this, and I took the wing. I still have it. Now I'm like, oh crap! Did I just bring an anchor in with me, carry it around with me? And I would say from that point on, things have gotten tough. There was
Yeah.
some very rough things that have been happening in my life since that point, and I'm like, yeah, yeah. I think I need to do some cleaning.
No
I
doubt,
need to get
brother.
rid of some things.
No doubt, brother. Thank you for having me on. I apologize
Yep.
I can't be on more with you,
No,
but
no.
we'll do this again, brother.
I agree. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Nathaniel. And
Me
again,
too.
one last time, where can everybody find you?
Parasymposia.com, and you can follow me on my Instagram page. So thank you for having me on, bud. I'll catch you later,
Perfect.
brother. Have a good
Yeah,
night,
I
my man.
appreciate that too. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Uh, that was my first time talking with Nathaniel, and it's not going to be the last. These types of conversations really remind us that there is so much more. This picture is so much bigger, and we're not just dealing with whether it be ghost stories or I just saw a UFO or this just happened. There is something much bigger. Um, that's touching us all. And I do believe that there is but I do believe that there is a balance out there that needs to be clear about but we need to be clear about where that line is, the distinction between good and evil. And sometimes that line isn't so easy to see. It gets blurred, hidden in the shadows. But if you find yourself walking close to it, you got to be certain which side you're on. And Nathaniel brought a lot of insight, and I'm grateful that he was able to share it with us all. And until next time, everyone, keep your curiosity wandering, keep your light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wonder why, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the cold gas flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the cold gas flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home.